to order. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Alvarado? Commissioner Orsini? Commissioner Burke?
Here.
Commissioner Dunn?
Here.
Commissioner Art?
Here.
Commissioner Cromer? Commissioner Cardino?
Present.
Commissioner Inman? Here. Commissioner Cavaloni?
Here.
Chair Gilnetti?
Present. Okay, that's item number one. Item number two is approval of the minutes.
Move.
Have a motion?
Move.
Second.
Have a motion by Commissioner Burke, second by Commissioner Tavaloni. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Andre, the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, good morning. I have really three items to report to you today. Let me start with the appointments to the deputy directors, vacancies that we had. As you know, we've appointed Laurel Jansen and Carrie Purvahidi to the deputy positions. So now we're staffed at that level, and you should expect the same service you've had from us, hopefully, in the past few years. With that, I wish to congratulate them again, and I'll give you the chance here to share your... The other two items I wanted to mention are, first of all, the annual report. We have an outline in your packet. This is the same outline that you saw with one change related to the STIP, but I think it's still along the same lines as we discussed before. So I would like you to approve the outline so we can proceed with the development of the report. You can take a motion now, or you can take it at the end of the presentation. I have one other item that will take a motion as well, which is the meeting calendars. So the meeting calendars for 2013, we made one change, which is related to the town hall meeting in September. The town hall meeting now is on September 12th and 13th, and it is in Paso Robles on Central Coast. So that's the only change. The meeting calendar for 2014, we've made some revisions based on commissioners' input. We've changed some of the dates and some of the locations around, and I'm here to ask for your approval for both the 2013 and the 2014 calendars.
Move it.
Motion by Commissioner Tavaloni and a second by Commissioner Dunn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
That concludes my report.
Okay. Thank you, Andre. Next item, number 4, commission reports. Any reports from any commissioners? Commissioner Dunn?
Thank you. Just a quick report that I served on the Ontario International Airport Authority yesterday and continue to see unbelievable decline in traffic and deterioration of the airport at Ontario. It's very troubling to me in light of our attempt at reducing greenhouse gases and congestion management in the LA area. So we will continue to monitor that thing and encourage LA and Ontario to allow Ontario to maintain local control from in my private sector hat. But I just want to share with you, it's, you know, all of our transportation systems are connected from air to trains to roads, and I just hate seeing an asset decline so significantly as Ontario when tourism is up and transportation capacity and use in every other airport, maybe except for Burbank, in the state is up. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other reports? Commissioner Inman?
I just want to report out that I did attend the first meeting of the National Freight Advisory Council, as well with my other Californians. I'm very proud that our state actually has 5 representatives on that commission. So we're going to be working hard to figure out what our freight future is going to look like.
Thank you. Any others? I'd like to recognize Senator Mark DeSaulnier has joined us. Thank you, Senator.
What are you doing starting on time?
All right. Next item, number 5, Commissioners' meeting for compensation. Have a motion?
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, second by Commissioner Dunn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And I don't believe Secretary Kelly is here yet, so we'll skip that one and move on to Caltrans Director Report. Malcolm's not here, and we have Norma.
I'm here. Thank you very much, Commissioners. Malcolm is at the WASHTO meeting in San Francisco. I'm going to first start with a few personnel changes. First, I'd like to congratulate Mike Miles, our District 7 Director. He retired from the department after 26 years of service to the department. Filling in behind him will be Carrie Bowen. Carrie, can you please stand up? She is the District Director in Stockton, so thank you very much for stepping up and taking on that position. So while Carrie is acting in District 7, we will have Amarjeet Benapal serving as the District 10 Director. He's our pavement engineer. Also, I'd like to announce the appointment of Tim Craigs as the Division Chief of Design. He backfills Terry Abbott's position, who Terry retired a couple months ago. And I am sad to announce that Denix Ambia, our Division Chief for Local Assistance, will be leaving the department for another agency, a local government agency. And I'd like to thank Denix for everything he's done with local assistance. We've been able to ensure that the locals have been able to use all of their federal funds and even receive a part of the August redistribution. So, Denix, thank you very much. Later today on the agenda is an item that we're bringing forward as an information item. It's the Accelerated Regional Transportation Improvement Project, or ARTI, LA Bundle. So today's presentation will be an informational item, and then we are hoping to bring it forward as soon as the business case is concluded and discuss it as a possible P3 project. I also wanted to thank the Commission and all of our partners for all of their effort in the work on the Buy America. We were able to get a reprieve, and thank you, FHWA, for your assistance on that. Brent Green is going to be discussing it in further detail, but we will be able to move a number of projects to construction with the interim solution. Also, at the request of the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, the state auditor conducted an audit of the State Water Control Board and the 9 regional quality control boards' Section 401 certification process as it relates to the department. And they did validate our concerns about the additional cost and efforts that go into complying with that. We are working internally to determine how best we can track the cost, because that was a weakness that we had. We were not able to identify how much it's costing us, but it is taking up some effort. So with that, I'm going to conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Norma. Any questions of Norma? Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Excuse me.
I just want to personally thank Mike Miles, too. When I heard the news that he was retiring, I reached out to him and said, does that mean the I-5's finished before you go? But, unfortunately, I think we still have a lot of work, but I do want to commend Mike. I'm sure he's not going to miss having to come before us and give us the update on a monthly basis, but we do appreciate the extra pressure that's been put on that project. Also want to hats off to our region in terms of our communication. We've learned how to communicate. Our SummerSlam, which is our major repair on the 60 freeway, is happening without serious delay, and I think that's really good for all of us. So if you haven't seen one of our signs up, that means you haven't been in Southern California.
I think the Commission as a whole wants to thank Mike for all the hard work that he did in District 7. Okay, the next report, we don't have the comedy show here, but we do have Rick Backlund. I know, I'm sure you will. It's hard to replace Vince, though.
Thank you, Commissioners, and
It's on.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners, and also wanted to thank Norma for the kind remarks about the clarification we were able to obtain for the non-federally funded utility projects That was a major work in progress, and we're very pleased to see that we can have some some help to the region in terms of working with utility companies for the non-federally funded utility agreements. We're hopeful that by December 31st we can have some good progress towards advancement of a number of projects in the region. Sort of following up on the comments from Vince, it's funny, every time I call Vince over the last 3 weeks and I ask, well, how's it going in Sacramento, I hear a one-word response: bolts. And I keep asking, okay, the bolts getting better. So just wanted to report out on the work we've been doing, working with Caltrans and the folks here on the bolts issue with the Bay Bridge. We have been asked to review the disposition of the bolts, and as well as the shim proposal that's as an interim fix, and that review is moving forward. We are in the process of looking at that. We also had folks from our Office of Bridge and Infrastructure come out as part of the examination of the bridge and the issues. We are working to complete a report by Federal Highways on our findings on the bolt report. I do not have a timetable, but I would expect that will be in the next few weeks. Excuse me just a second. And then just to change subjects in terms of freight issues, the freight day. The critical freight network, we've been told that by the end of the calendar year we should be seeing some movement on that in terms of invitations going out to states. For the national freight network, this is the network of 33,000 miles that, as part of MAP 21, is to be identified. The latest update that we have is that the Federal Register notice on the network will be coming out in September. I do not have a date set, but it will be after the Labor Day holiday. But more to come on that. So, in terms of personnel changes, I did want to announce that Rebecca Bennett, our Director of Local Programs, retired at the end of July. She was with us for 8 years and did excellent work advancing the local programs unit, working with Denix actually. So we're sorry to see her leave. She's moving on to bigger and better things, and just wanted to make sure that the folks were aware of that she is retired, and that we are also looking at the potential for a reorganization within our division, looking at combining state and local programs to have a stronger focus on projects per region. So more to come. We're still in discussions, but that's one of the options we've been looking at. So that's what I have to report.
Any questions of Rick? We're anxiously waiting for the bolt report.
Yeah, and we will be following up shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move back to item number 6, report from the agency secretary. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Kelly with the Transportation Agency. Of course, the new agency commenced operations on July 1st after relocating our offices in Sacramento. We are quickly moving forward to add some additional staff to our capabilities. We're interviewing now for a transportation deputy secretary to fill the role the role that Brian Annis was filling, who's now our undersecretary of the agency. We'll be announcing some additional hiring soon, including an environmental policy and housing coordinator position, council position, and then we have 2 outstanding we're interviewing for still in innovative finance and rail policy. So we're still in the midst of putting things together at the agency. We are also working closely with the department and others, staff of the commission, on our California Transportation Infrastructure Priorities process, which is the work group we put together at the governor's direction to roll through both performance measures, reforms in the transportation system that we want to move forward with, and of course investment options and the development of an investment plan that would cover about a 10-year horizon here in California. So that work is ongoing. We also instituted earlier this year a performance review of the Department of Transportation. We contracted with an outside entity, the Smart State Transportation Initiative, which is a nonprofit out of the University of Wisconsin, and they work with DOTs from around the country. They have about 19 DOTs they work with around the country on policies of interest, on performance of departments of transportation around the country. They've released a report called the Innovative DOT that came out earlier in the year. And they are helping refine both the mission and of the department and assuring that we have processes in place for the department to fulfill that mission. And so that's sort of my quick description and summary of the work we have underway now. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the Secretary? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 9, report by regional agencies. Adrian Cardoso.
Good morning, Chair Gilmetti, Commissioners, Senator Desaulnier, Secretary Kelly, and Chief Deputy Ortega. My name is Adrienne Cardoso. I'm with Orange County Transportation Authority and here today on behalf of the RTPA Group. First, the RTPAs would like to extend our congratulations to Laurel Jansen for her promotion. We would also like to thank Denix Anbia for working so closely with us the last few years to deliver state and federally funded projects. Also, we would like to extend our appreciation to Will Ritter from San Joaquin COG for serving the past 2 years, first as vice moderator and then as moderator. The RTPA group met yesterday and had a very full agenda. We discussed the MAP 21 working group meeting, which addressed the distribution of funds for fiscal year 13-14 and also potential performance measures. We learned that there will be 2 notices of proposed rulemaking that are expected in October, and that FHWA is planning a MAP 21 forum in California in late October or November. We look forward to participating in the forum along with Caltrans, CTC, and other stakeholders. CTC staff reported on the proposed policy to extend the TCIF program, and the RTPA group is thankful to the Commission and Commission staff that it will continue to provide funding to help deliver important Good Movements projects. Finally, the group had a robust discussion on the proposed 2014 STIP guidelines. There was a lot of discussion regarding the proposed reporting requirements. While we all agree that accountability is important, the specific proposed reporting requirements may not provide the right information. CTC staff has indicated they will be flexible in what they accept in order to take each region's individual circumstances into account, but there continue to be a number of unanswered questions. I think the biggest remaining question is how the information will be used and why it is needed. The regions in general requested that the existing guidelines remain unchanged unless necessary. In particular, the $50 million project cost threshold for providing additional information. We worked with CTC staff on this specific issue and may have come up with a compromise, which I expect Mr. Weiss may present later today. The regions, however, still prefer to keep the existing guidelines the way they are with the $50 million threshold. With that, just one final comment. We'd like to thank the Commission for all of their efforts related to the reprieve on Buy America. And in the Southern California region, we'd specifically like to thank Commissioner Inman and Commissioner Dunn for all of their efforts. That concludes my report.
Thank you, AJ. Any questions? I, too, would like to thank Commissioner Inman and Dunn for all the hard work they did on Buy America. It was a yeoman's job, and I think Malcolm had a hand in that, too, in helping unblock the road.
We're not finished.
Yeah. Cagney and Lacey, we're at it.
All right. The next report is on the rural county. Sharon?
Good morning, Commissioners. Since our last meeting, we've had the Rural Counties Task Force on July 19th. The focus of that was going over the STIP guidelines. We had very good input from your staff as well as Caltrans. We've also been working on the CTIP and the active transportation program that the Transportation Agency are working on. We are supportive of both of those efforts. However, I do have some concerns about the active transportation program. We like the concept of streamlining and combining the 6 fund types. Now it seems to be getting divided up more. We're concerned about the criteria in terms of whether or not they'll be more urban in nature. There are a lot of active transportation opportunities in rural areas of the state as well. We participated in the hearing for the STIP guidelines. We sent a letter in with our comments. We still have concerns over the lowering of the performance for the individual projects to the from 50 million down to 20, or there may have been something worked out yesterday. With that, we're looking towards the potential of having more flexibility in terms of looking at things from a qualitative as well as a quantitative level, and also using available data that we have right now. It's pretty challenging when you have a staff of just a couple people to put together some of these larger reports, so we'd like to keep that simple if possible. And with that, I think those are the significant things that we've been working on from a rural county's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Any questions? Thank you. All right, we'll move on to self-help counties. I understand Andy's not here.
Thank you, Chair Gilmetti. Commissioners, my name is Sarkis Kachik, and I'm with the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, and I'm here on behalf of the Self-Help Counties Coalition. A couple items for you today. The first one is that the coalition will hold our next quarterly meeting on August 21st in San Francisco. The second item is that the coalition continues to be an active participant on the California Transportation Infrastructure Priorities Group, as discussions on topics related to funding and maintenance issues relate to local sales tax funding and the potential lowering of voter thresholds for new or extending self-help opportunities. The coalition is excited to help Secretary Kelly and our partners in transportation help shape the future of funding and project delivery in the state. The third item is that the coalition is also continuing to participate on the ongoing discussions related to MAP 21, and we look forward to those discussions. And last but not least, the coalition is excited to let you know about the upcoming Focus on the Future conference, which will actually be held here in San Diego, and the dates for the conference are November 17th through the 19th. We look forward to having all of you join us at the conference and having another successful event. We'd like your input on any discussion topics, or if you'd also like to volunteer, we look forward to working with you at that. We look forward to working with you on that as well. That concludes my presentation, and thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Sarkis? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, item number 12, state and federal legislative matters. Laura?
All right, can I turn her microphone on?
It's on.
Okay. Good morning. The Assembly reconvened from summer recess yesterday, and the Senate will reconvene on August 12th. Staff is currently monitoring 29 bills, thank you, as outlined in Attachment A. Staff is recommending the Commission take action and send a comment letter on Senate Bill 416, authored by Senator Liu. This bill would make changes to the Roberti Act regarding the sale of surplus residential property in the 710 corridor and would create the 710 Rehabilitation Account. This account would allow proceeds from the sale of 710 properties to be continuously appropriated for the purpose of conducting property repairs. Funds in excess of $500,000 in the Rehabilitation Account will be transferred to the State Highway Account to fund transportation projects in specified communities. Staff recommends that the Commission provide suggested clarifications to the author, as outlined in Attachment B, to ensure that the legislation is well positioned to utilize excess Rehabilitation Account funding to finance transportation projects. The suggested modifications seek to clarify the definition of eligible projects, clarify the process by which projects are selected and approved for funding, and specify that the Commission will formulate guidelines for the programming and allocation of projects. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the staff report, approve staff recommendations, and direct staff to finalize the letter to Senator Liu for the Chair's signature. That concludes my report, and I would gladly entertain any questions.
Any questions of Laura? Commissioner Inman?
I have a question in terms of the annual repair cost. How much are we typically spending? Norma, this might be for you.
I would respectfully defer that to the department.
I don't have the answer, but it's something we can provide.
I mean, it's difficult to know the 500,000, if that's a good number. I'll put on my day job hat and a real estate landlord. Our set-asides, we have to have money set aside for that time when we need the new roof. So I don't know what the answer is.
Any other questions? So we need a motion.
Yes, please.
I have a motion by Commissioner Tavaloni, a second by Commissioner Dunn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. I would like to make a comment that Senator DeSaulnier is here on his vacation. He took a vacation day to be with us. You having trouble down there?
I have. This thing's too complicated for me. I just want to let the commission know that I get almost daily updates from your chair as to his personal opinions on legislation. So I actually decided this is sort of a vacation. I'd rather listen to him to his face than get his caustic voicemails. And I make this report with great reverence.
Moving right along. Item number 13. Mitch?
Stephen Keck will be making a presentation. Following his presentation, I will have a couple of comments.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioner. Stephen Keck with Caltrans, here to give the budget and allocation capacity update. I'm going to actually start with the allocation capacity for the 2013-14 year. At the last meeting in June, I presented draft allocation capacity. This is the final allocation capacity for the year based on the final budget as it's now enacted. We're looking at a total of about $3.5 billion in allocation capacity across all programs, including the bond programs. That breaks down to about $2.1 billion for the SHOP, $640 million for the STIP, $71 million for the Traffic Congestion Relief Program, and just $688 million for Proposition 1B. So each one of these programs has a little bit of information behind the capacity, and I'm going to go through them all. The bonds, you may note, very much significantly less than last year, and probably less than in any year since the bonds passed in 2006. That is because we are nearing the end of allocations for the bond program. There's less than, I believe the number is $800 million left unallocated from the bond programs. So this is it. This is the end. After this year, there'll be a bare trickle. Some of the programs continue for a couple more years. But the bulk of work is done, and these projects are now either on the way out to construction or already under construction. The Traffic Congestion Relief Program, generally speaking, the annual funding for that program is $83 million a year. This capacity is a little less than that because we over-allocated last year on purpose to get projects underway that were ready to go. So this is what's left of the new revenue for this year. On the SHOP side, it's a bit higher than we would normally expect. In June, I believe I mentioned that there were a lot of projects that delivered in June after the meeting that would be allocated in this month. So we rolled over that capacity from last year into this year to account for that. And finally, for the STIP, our calculations show STIP capacity available at $640 million for capital and local assistance. We note, and we've talked about this in prior meetings, that this may not be enough to fully fund all the projects that come forward for allocation this year. We've had numerous discussions with CTC staff on this. Primarily, the reason for this is that there's a significant amount of capital projects this year as it relates to support. In other words, the ratio is much higher on the capital side than we would normally see. However, we have made a commitment to fully fund all of the projects in the STIP that come forward for allocation this year, that are programmed for allocation in this year, even if that amount exceeds the capacity. And we are able to do that by using a little trick on the federal side called advanced construction, or AC, which allows us to get federal approval for a project without putting obligation authority on that project. And in doing so, we can let these projects move forward without impacting the other programs. Increasing AC through this manner is also consistent with the 2014 fund estimate, which envisions increasing advanced construction over the 5-year period. And increasing advanced construction helps us weather those years we may have short delivery or anything else that comes up unexpectedly, like a new Buy America program or something that would slow down allocation. So doing this is actually a win-win for from both sides. We will be able to do all the STIP projects and increase AC at the same time, so it's a good thing. Any questions on capacity before I move on? Before I turn to the next slide, don't panic. So this is a 24-month cash forecast of the public transportation account. We normally do a shorter forecast for the PTA, but I wanted to show this out there and point out quite a few things. The first is that funding for the PTA has changed rather significantly over the last few years. One of the changes is that most of the sales tax revenue collected goes to state transit assistance now instead of in the PTA. And the second is that a number of years ago, the outlook for the PTA was much different than it is now. We had, at that time, expectation of huge revenue coming in from when we still had sales taxes in spillover, and we allocated several $100 million worth of projects 2 years in a row. What we're seeing here is that revenue pictures changed a little bit. Those projects are still spending, and we're going to spend down the existing cash balance over the next 2 years. The reason I said don't panic is because the year after this, we get a loan repayment back from the, well, it's from the state highway account, but technically the state highway account borrowed it from the PTA to backfill a loan from the general fund. That loan repayment will bolster the PTA. The expenditures from those projects we voted a few years ago will taper off, and we expect the PTA to be more or less stable and sustainable in the near future, or at least after 14, 15, everything will sort of flatten out. So don't panic about the PTA, but we'll be bringing that cash balance down over the next couple of years as those projects spend out. And then this is the state highway account cash forecast, and it is a little longer forecast than you normally see. This is a 3-year state highway account cash forecast. And we did a 3-year forecast to show the effect of a much higher than we would have anticipated a year ago sales tax revenue. And this is from the 3-cent gas tax increase that we've been talking about now for a few months. It's a one-time infusion of cash. Most experts, including the Department of Finance, agree that the sales tax, the excise tax will probably decrease next year. But what happens when you infuse one-time cash into the system like this is we allocate more to projects, but those projects spend over time, and they spend that cash over time. So what we see in the SHA is an increase in the balance over this next year as we collect those new taxes. Then we sort of peak, and then we'll go back down again as those new projects that we're allocating to spend the cash. So normally we would show you a 2-year forecast, but I didn't want anyone to get the idea that we're going to have $800 million at the end of next year and then ask me why we're not spending it, when in fact the answer is we are spending it, it just takes a little time. I think I'll skip this slide just because I've been talking a lot. This is essentially the things I've been telling you about since the spring. This is the final Budget Act. The only thing I'll point out, because I have a personal vested interest in it, is that non-Article 19 revenue, which is that revenue deposited into the state highway account not associated with excise taxes or with weight fees, is now permanently redirected to pay for debt service on transportation-related bonds. Prior to 2000, the year 2000, those funds would have stayed in the state highway account. Between 2000 and about 2008, those funds went to the public transportation account. And since about 2008, they've been going to pay for debt service for transportation bonds. I point that out because it's a significant change, and it does affect capacity in the fund estimate as well. We've talked about this before, but it's a subject that I don't like to give up easily. And finally, last thing I want to talk about, and then I'll make way for the next person, is the administrative set-aside for Proposition 1B bonds. The administrative set-aside for Prop 1B bonds is a set-aside for administration of the programs, for the accounting of the programs, budgeting of the programs. It's a set-aside for payments, expenses made by the State Treasurer's Office, from the Controller's Office, and from the Department of Finance associated with managing the bonds. When we set up the programming for these bonds, the maximum allowed set-aside for admin is 3%. We set aside just 2%. We were conservative on that. However, we're past the peak of allocations, and we wanted to take a look at where we were with that 2% and whether there was any of that 2% that we set aside that may be available for projects. And in doing so, we looked at what we have spent and what we know we will continue to spend in the future. And we came up with a possible amount of up to $120 million across all programs that could be allocated towards projects if we get the budget authority to do so. There is one exception to this rule, and that is the local bridge seismic retrofit account or program. That program was very small, $125 million program, but it has more than 400 projects in it. So the amount of administrative work administering those grants, the accounting work, and the auditing work that goes into checking up on those projects is higher than we expected. And so we will need to use the full 3% on that one program, but not more than that. So we will be working with staff here in the near future to determine how we're going to handle this, what we want to do with it. We have a few options. We can use these on existing or new projects, or we can let it go and save the debt service. And since the debt service is more or less paid from transportation funds these days, sort of a wash. With that, I'll end my presentation. I'll be happy to entertain questions.
Any questions to Stephen? When are you going to get together and see how we can use this money?
As soon as Mitch is ready to do so. In fact, we've already been talking about it a little bit.
Good segue. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yes, we've had numerous conversations about this. The one thing I would note of those other list of funds, the state-local partnership program, the $12 million there, that was a program where the proposition specified 5 years for which the commission had to allocate those funds. So that's a program where we won't be able to access that $12 million. But the other ones we should be able to find a way to hopefully utilize. There's a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. So the other ones I am not closing the door on, although Stephen and I will, and Mr. Maller, Stephen Maller will have discussions about these. The other things I would want to note, occasionally we've thrown out some things that happen outside California when we talk about the budget and allocation capacity. There are two things I wanted to note. The Congressional Budget Office had testified in front of Congress on the status of the Highway Trust Fund last month. Their current projections are that both the highway account and the transit account of the Federal Highway Trust Fund will start showing deficits in 2015 at the current rate of expenditure and revenues. We have for the last couple of years been spending at a greater rate than the revenues coming in. As you recall, MAP 21 provided a little over 2 years of funding with basically 10 years of estimated savings. So this obviously is not a sustainable path. The other thing outside California that was interesting, I've noted in recent presentations there have been a few states that have raised their excise taxes. Last month in Massachusetts, the legislature overrode the governor's veto and raised the excise tax on gas by 3 cents and indexed it to inflation.
Good news.
It's not impossible.
Didn't Wyoming or Montana just do a 10-cent?
Wyoming did something recently, and it was a very significant percentage increase. It was not a huge dollar increase. I don't have the list out in my head. Virginia did something. Some of them were restructurings, which involve changes of how the taxes were done, but involved a net increase.
Mr. Chairman, and none of the Mitch approach, however, the numbers that California is already paying. I understand that we're still at least one of the highest.
We're number one?
Yeah.
Yes, we are still very high in many things. It may be, I don't have the data on all the excise taxes, but I believe excise tax, road miles, VMT, we're the top of all those categories.
And we have the best
We have the best transportation commission.
Okay, any other questions of either Stephen or Mitchell? All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 14, STIP guidelines. Mitchell?
Commissioners, item 14 is a hearing on the 2014 STIP guidelines. These guidelines were presented at the June CTC meeting. Commission staff held a conference call in mid-July with regions and anybody else who was interested to talk about the guidelines. The Commission held a hearing on the 18th. As a result of this input, a number of changes have been proposed there in your handout, and they're highlighted in gray. If hopefully we have color copies there. Those are the changes that are highlighted are the changes from what was presented in June. Additionally, following the RTPA meeting, staff would propose two other changes. First, it was pointed out that on page 40, section 68, the second bullet needs to be struck because it's no longer consistent with the changes we're making in the paragraph below. So we would recommend that bullet get struck. The second change was a compromise that would be alluded to earlier in terms of a level for project-specific reporting. It had in the past been $50 million, and there's a second condition related to 50% of the target. We're keeping that. But there was proposed perhaps there should be a third condition or a certain amount of STIP dollars, and what staff would suggest would be we look at the $50 million total project costs or $15 million of STIP funds put on the project. That would capture about half as many projects in theory if you look at the data from the last STIP. So at the $50 million level, we were capturing about 12 projects out of the roughly 100 we added to the last STIP, and that amounted to 48% of the STIP dollar-wise, approximately. If we would have taken it down to 20 million, that would add about another dozen projects and capture over 70% of the dollar amount. If instead going to the 20 million, we looked at 50 million in total costs or 15 million of STIP costs, we would capture about 6 more projects, and those are the ones adding the larger funds, at least in theory. And we talked about this with the regions, and what I suggested to them is I'm happy with proposing this compromise. You know, they want the 50, I want the 20. This is in the middle. Nobody's happy. But what I suggested is we do this and we look at it again. What I think will likely happen is we'll have a lot of projects coming in at 14, and we might not really be picking anything up. But I'm certainly willing to give it a try if it is preferable to lowering the whole threshold. With those two changes, this is what we'll be recommending for adoption in the next item, and would suggest that the chair open up the hearing to any comment that the public has.
Any questions from the commission first? We have several speakers. The first speaker, Kirk Brockey, followed by Shirley Medina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. I'm Kurt Brockey in OCTA's Planning Division. Happy to be here today, and I wanted to thank Mitch for the process that he's gone through with the Commission staff in terms of entertaining changes to the STIP guidelines. I did want to give you a little context for the changes that are being considered before you today. The first is MAP 21 changes. As you know, MAP 21 eliminated the T program, or Transportation Enhancements Program. In your guidelines today, that change is there. In addition to that, you heard briefly about the Federal Highways Notice of Proposed Rulemaking that's underway for metrics and measures. That will obviously flow down to all of us, including the state and regional agencies. That rulemaking is underway now, and it's going to roll out over the next year or so. So we do expect major changes to come through Federal Highways and Federal Transit as well. There are also statutory changes that are being considered that you're aware of, and then existing law requires you to take action on the STIP guidelines today. We still have issues with the guidelines. We think the compromise that Mitch has mentioned is okay. Frankly, though, we would prefer that the guideline changes only focus on those that are absolutely necessary to respond to specifically the MAP 21 changes, and that would focus on the T program specifically. There are major revisions to the guidelines as a result of that, and we suggest that it might be prudent to defer action on some of the other changes that are proposed until the rulemaking is complete and the actual implementation of the metrics and measures in particular is very clear. Otherwise, we as a regional agency will be forced to prepare new metrics and measures that frankly could change via FHWA and may flow down into the STIP process. So that concludes my remarks today. Thank you for consideration of this request, again, to really focus on those changes that are absolutely necessary at this point in time. Thank you.
Any questions of Kurt? Did you want to comment on that, Mitch?
I guess I would provide two comments. First of all, this is the direction the governor wanted to go. It was called out in the governor's budget summary, the desire to do more performance measurement in the STIP. I would also say that the guidelines give considerable flexibility in which measures a region chooses to use. And just to quote from a section, if any of the performance measures in Part A do not reflect the goals contained in RTP, or if an RTIP does not contain goals that are measured by the performance measures contained within, simply state non-applicable for each indicator or each performance measure. If you're not using it, you don't have to start using it because it's listed in the STIP guidelines. There's a considerable amount of flexibility. Additionally, many of the performance measures that are added, almost all of them came as a result of a study that was done to look at what the MPOs are already doing and to try to get consistency across the MPOs. This was funded by the Strategic Growth Council, and SANDAG conducted the study. But it looked at what's already being done, not making up new ones. There are undoubtedly some that are new, but there's considerable flexibility here. We've not rejected an RTIP because somebody didn't use a specific performance measure.
Thank you. Next speaker is Shirley Medina, followed by Patricia Chen.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the guidelines and for the workshop that was held earlier. And I fully support Mr. Brocky's comments as well. We understand that due to AB 1290, CTC staff has added language requiring regions with an adopted sustainable community strategy to discuss how its RTIP relates to its SES. However, this requirement may be premature as AB 1290 has not passed yet, and proposed amendment language could change the reporting of SES implementation to a different time frame, such as from every other year to every 4 years. That's proposed in an amended language. Should the Commission retain the SES reporting requirement for the 2014 STIP cycle, the Commission should consider two important factors. First, the Commission should consider that regions may choose not to fund SES-type projects in their RTIPs, as there are many other fund sources that can be used on SES-type projects, specifically lower-cost projects such as bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Those are a little bit more amenable to using local funds or other types of fund sources that don't have that many strings attached, so we can get those projects implemented on a timelier basis. The CTC should also consider that when funding is short and allocation plans are developed, priority has been given to state highway facilities, and you will likely not see bicycle and pedestrian bicycle lanes proposed in state highway facilities. We would like to work with CTC staff on the SES reporting requirement for the 2016 STIP cycle when legislation is passed and when SES implementation efforts are further along. For example, the SCAG region's SES RTP was just approved in June 2012, and so we're still working on that implementation, so we're in the early stages. We also request that the Commission allow the MPOs with multiple counties to prepare a comprehensive report that combines all its counties and all of the fund sources used to meet SES implementation to give an accurate portrayal of SES implementation. Reporting on just one fund source could misrepresent our SES efforts, and we should not be obligated to use STIP funds when there are other more appropriate funds to implement SES projects. Lastly, the SCAG SES is not based on projects alone. It includes land use planning tools, and there are other local efforts being done to prepare climate action plans. So there's a whole lot of effort that goes into the SCS implementation that we need to consider. Just one analogy here. You have a recipe for cupcakes, and you have all these ingredients, and if you just judge the cupcake on one of the ingredients, eggs, it's not going to look very good. Some people might like eggs alone, but we just want to make sure that we do a very good job in reporting our SCS implementation efforts so that it's an accurate portrayal of what we're doing to meet SB 375 requirements. Thank you.
Any questions of Shirley? Mitchell?
Well, I think Shirley raises an excellent point that a region might choose to use other funds to implement the key projects in their sustainable community strategy rather than use RTIP funds. I think that would make for a very succinct report to include in the RTIP, just so the Commission understands the relationship, because that may be a very reasonable discussion, and in many areas there are multiple fund types. So it's not meant to force regions to put certain projects into the STIP, but just to understand how their proposal relates to the bigger picture of what they're doing.
Okay, the next speaker is Patricia Chen, followed by Andrea Zurich.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to comment, and I just wanted to mention briefly that several of the agencies in Southern California have been speaking together, and although we're speaking on individual points, we support the comments that each of the others is making. For Section 20, Metro particularly would like to pull out the issue of the proposed language requiring a comparison of RTIPs to Caltrans' statement of needs for the state highway system and the intercity rail system. SB 45 directs the regional agencies to establish priorities for STIP funding and select projects to be submitted in the RTIPs. And we do this through our long-range transportation planning process and through ongoing coordination with the district. We try to take into consideration goals like the SCS goals, which our CTC has just discussed, also cost-benefit consideration, as well as the needs that were presented by our partner at the district. So that's quite a cupcake, a long list of ingredients that needs to go into this process. And I think that requiring a comparison as part of the STIP hearing kind of condenses this long process and takes it out of context. And so our recommendation would be to leave out the last sentence at the second paragraph on page 10, requiring that comparison as part of the RTIP submittal, because we think it's a longer process, that it is important, but we do it as part of our compliance with SB 45. Thank you very much.
Any questions of Patricia? Mitchell?
I would say again, it's a question of understanding, from Commission staff and the Commissioners, what is being proposed and how it relates to what the priorities of the state are. The state does not have other funds to fund the state transportation system. It's not to say that what the state's needs are what should always be funded in an RTIP, but just to understand why choices are being made. The Commission is being asked to adopt that. For many years, the Commission priority has been projects on the state highway system, and this is just to understand how the state's priorities compare with what regional priorities are. It's not requiring anybody to fund any specific projects. And frankly, if the discussion is already being made, I don't understand why there would be a fear of talking about it in an RTIP.
Okay, any other questions? The next speaker is Andrea Zurich, followed by Ken Cow.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Andrea Zurich. I'm with San Bernardino Associated Governments, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today regarding the guidelines. I support the speakers before me, and I'm going to be addressing Section 68 of the guidelines specifically, and that's the section for reporting project benefits at project completion as compared to the anticipated benefits prior to the start of construction. We appreciate that staff has added proposed language that allows an agency to defer the reporting of benefits if more time is required to realize the optimum benefits of a project, and that staff has now proposed a compromise to the minimum project threshold. However, we still remain concerned that the reporting requirement is moving forward without discussion of what is expected of these reports and what will be done with the information that's contained in these reports. We agree that measurement of benefits is important, both to our analysis of future project planning and to the public to know how their public dollars are being used on these projects. However, comparing actual benefits to the anticipated simulated benefits that are forecast 20 years into the future may not provide the outcome that we're looking for. Therefore, we request that the proposed changes to Section 68 be deferred at this time, and that a committee be established to give CTC staff, Caltrans, and regional agencies an opportunity to consult on how to make this evaluation of benefits most meaningful and more realistic and cost-effective. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Andrea. Any questions of Andrea? Mitchell?
Sure. I would say that the reporting on project completion is not a new requirement. It is a requirement that has not been complied with by probably every region. It took a while to work with Caltrans to get them reporting. It's a part of the quarterly report that the Commission gets every month. There are a couple of parts to it. One is we have made the reporting less frequent, from semi-annual to just every 2 years with the RTIP. We've specified some of the information. We've allowed the aggregation of data for smaller projects. So in some ways, we're lessening the reporting requirement. But we do think it's important to go back and look at what did we think we were buying with the taxpayers' money, and what did we end up buying? And even and what we may learn, as Andrea said, is we may learn that our methods we use to estimate the benefits are wrong. Not that the project doesn't give a benefit now, but it may quite likely be our way we estimate what the benefit's going to be in the future is wrong. I mean, we've seen that in specific cases. There was a number of years ago a famous case in Seattle where they built a bridge and they thought it was going to be at capacity in 20 years, and as soon as it opened, within a very short time it was at capacity because they didn't accurately forecast what was going to happen. That's an important thing to know. If we're not figuring out what our benefit's going to be in the future, then how are we accurately deciding what we're going to do? If we're making project-specific choices based on what we think the benefit's going to be, but we never actually go to see, did we achieve that benefit? Are we really making the best use of the taxpayers' money?
Okay. The next speaker is Ken Cow. Ken?
Thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to address you today. I'm Kenneth Cow with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. I would like to support all the previous speakers. The only thing I'd like to address right now is on the $50 million project level evaluation threshold. I still do support keeping it at $50 million. However, I would like to say that the compromise proposal is a step in the right direction, and I did want to thank Mitch and your staff for working with us. This was proposed literally like 15 hours ago, and we hammered this compromise out, and it's a step in the right direction. Ideally, we can keep it at 50, but we definitely want to thank you and your staff for considering our comments. Thank you.
I think you did a lot better than the BART negotiators. Any questions? Commissioner Arp?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm trying to get to the core of something's going on with my speaker here. I'll turn it down. I have a loud voice. I'm trying to get to the core of what I think is probably another microphone. Can we try? Okay, that's better. I'm trying to get to the core of what is really at issue here. I mean, what I'm hearing is the regions, if they had their druthers, would just rather leave everything the way it is. We are, in my view, we are at a very pivotal time in transportation funding. We're coming on the downside of 6 years of a lot of money that was put on the plate by virtue of Proposition 1B. We don't really have anything yet in sight that will replace that very key revenue. We are looking at STIP funds that are going to be continuing to decline. We have a system that is driven a great deal by SB 45, which was passed, 20 years ago? But SB 45 didn't anticipate sustainability, didn't anticipate SB 375. A lot of the land use, jobs center, the kinds of issues that we are grappling with today that really weren't around that much in the mid-90s. So it seems to me we have to be looking at how do we look at a very finite and declining right now, unless we can turn that around, but for the time being, a declining set of revenue, and we've got funding that the regions have had a lot of flexibility in determining what their priorities are, but it is state funds. It's a state transportation improvement program. It seems to me that there ought to be a rethinking of how we look at these funds and set priorities and make sure that the projects we're spending taxpayer dollars on are the best projects to help complete the state system and will also benefit the regions. I don't know what the answer to that is, but it seems to me that we're trying to get to something like that, and we're getting a lot of pushback. So where do we go? I think the complaints have to be more than we don't want to do more paperwork. Nobody wants more paperwork. If we're just generating a system that's generating more red tape, then we're probably not going the right place either. But I think the idea is that we're trying to figure out how we prioritize a limited, finite amount of state funding to make sure that the best projects get the money first, and that projects that have been carried along for a long period of time, do all these projects have a realistic notion of getting funded down the road? How do we really get to the core of spending the money on the projects that we really need to spend the money on? And I don't really hear an answer to that today.
Any other questions? Commissioner Inman?
I agree with Commissioner Arp there, but I think that there's so many moving pieces to this puzzle. I, too, am struggling with how to get exactly the right information, no more, so that we can make really holistic, great decisions. And so I'm not interested in making work, but I am interested in getting really meaningful information. I like the suggestion of a committee of experts. Perhaps if we could give a short timeline to have some folks really roll up their sleeves. I don't know the specific MAP 21 requirements. MAP 21 is almost at its midpoint. It may be at the midpoint of the 27 months. So MAP 21 will be finished shortly. So where do we stand, and what do we specifically have to do for MAP 21? Could we identify those, or have we?
Most of the performance measures in for MAP 21 have not been developed. Some of the specific areas are included in here, and some of the safety things are included there in terms of fatalities and injuries are already in the STIP guidelines. We won't know that till after we, are well into the STIP development process. I think that's timing-wise, we're not going to know what they're doing till too late to help us in the 2014 STIP cycle.
Commissioner Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like reporting from the standpoint in my day job. One of the things that I really want to do is to be able to persuade the public that the promises that we've made to them with the dollars that we're spending, their dollars, have been delivered. So I'm with you, Mitch, on that aspect of it. I think we should be able to demonstrate at the end of the day that, see, the projects we built did help with mobility, did help with goods movement. I like that aspect. But I'm also intrigued by the whole cupcake idea that we're measuring eggs and not cupcakes. So I'm struggling with that. I'm also struggling with the fact that our dollars are limited and everybody's talking about new metrics. I know sustainable community strategies are still new. They're not general plan amendments. So at the local level, they're really hard to measure right now. We've got to give them more time to be successful and to say all the right things to encourage people to do that. The only thing that you have to correct me if I'm wrong, from what I'm hearing, and I thought that Mr. Brocky made some good points where the feds are coming up with some new metrics of their own. So everybody's measuring everything. It's starting to feel like school to me. Do you know? We're measuring all of the performances of our teachers, and we're teaching to the test, and we're forgetting to educate our students. And I think, the governor was very strong about that point too. And we're watching even the state and the feds battle on education and the metrics there. Let's not repeat that here. The only thing I think we have to do today is remove the T material because it's no longer a part of STIP with MAP 21, right? That's the only thing we absolutely have to do to approve the STIP amendments. So I want you to teach me because I don't know. Other than the rest of it, I'm just the parade of folks saying, really? What problem are we trying to fix here and what are we trying to measure? So talk to me about that.
I would have to go through, yes, we should remove the T. I would have to take a minute and go through all the number of changes because there are quite a few in there if we didn't want to do anything else because there are also guidelines specific to this cycle in terms of what we're going to prioritize. Should we not make the other changes, it'll be very interesting to start getting those semi-annual reports on completed projects from the regions because that would stay in the guidelines. Mm-hmm. I think Rachel wanted to say.
I was just going to say a few things with regards to MAP 21 because I'm working with the department and FHWA regarding performance measures. Their rulemaking for all their different rules, all the rules are actually not going to be in place until spring of 2015, which really coincides with your next STIP guidelines cycle. Their rules aren't meant to be, or their performance measures aren't meant to be the end-all and be-all in all of them. They're just for their funding. So I don't think that what Mitch is requiring is in opposition, and that what they're doing, if there's anything that needs to change, could then be changed in the 2016 STIP cycle. Mm-hmm. What the feds were really saying is this is a minimum, but you as states should be doing a lot of other measurements already on your own. Right. They were very clear on all the discussions I've had with them. But that, their rules don't come out until spring of 2015, and then we have till 2016 to come up with our targets, and then there's another 180 days after that for the regions, and then the actual measurements aren't for many years. So if you want to start looking at stuff now, the MAP 21's a little ways out. So,
and I guess I would also note that most of the individual performance measures that we've changed or added are in line with what the MPOs are already doing. And again, that our guidelines have flexibility to say if these are not the measures you use, don't use these and report others.
We just hadn't heard that from any of our speakers today. That's what's
I think
so fascinating.
They didn't read the page before the table.
Okay.
Commissioner Burke?
Well, as someone who comes here with regional as well as local agency experience, I am very sensitive to some of the concerns that have been expressed. But first of all, I'd like to say this, that I think that 375 has worked very well in the region that I come from. And there's some really successful things that are moving forward, and I'm very impressed with them. And I think there was a commitment to sustainability. But I think there's something that can be gained from a look at the priorities and having them stated very clearly, available, and particularly from the standpoint of the STIP. I really know that everyone's very sensitive to this, that they don't like to have CTC interfering in their priorities. And I don't think that this says that there will be interference. It simply says that they're stated and that there is a performance measure. And there's really nothing wrong with that. And, of course, as I say, I come from a background of where I do come from the local agency. And I also am also sensitive to the fact that there's often political overtones in terms of some of those local agency decisions that may not be in line with the priorities. So I don't think there's going to be any real problem here. I believe that there's nothing that happens, or there's no wrong, or there's no concern. And I'm sure that CTC realizes that they're going to have to be concerned about some of the expressions that have been made here, and as we move forward. So I'm not uncomfortable.
Thank you. Any other questions? Secretary Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this action and this activity is for the commission itself to perform, and I respect that. I just want to make a comment that in the context of the work that we're doing through the agency and with stakeholders on the transportation investment priority process, there's really 4 objectives that we've outlined. One is how do we better preserve the state highway system, which is a core function for the state of California and something we're well behind on. How do we integrate a new and innovative project, a statewide project like high-speed rail, into the state's existing transportation system? How do we update and revise our freight strategy, which is a process that we have a separate group on. I know Commissioner Inman is working on the national level on the same thing. And then I think importantly, it's how do we partner now with regions on 375 objectives? How do we move those plans from planning documents to implementation programs? And I just would observe that I think in that, like all things, funding and everything else, it's partnership is the key here. This commission has put together a needs assessment that identified a discouragingly large needs assessment over the next 10 years. The state of California is not going to meet that alone. It's going to take the partnership with the regions to get it done. And I think, that's my way of saying that in all things you're going to need this partnership, but particularly in moving 375 plans from planning documents to implementable programs. And I think even though we have a fairly decentralized funding program for transportation in California, the more the commission and the state could know about how the investments through the STIP are helping move forward and implement those programs, the better. And I think it helps understand what our role is in implementing those programs and areas that we can better partner with the regions as they move forward with those. So it's just, my 2 cents on this and some of the conversations we're having in another context. I would just, I endorse the direction of moving toward greater reporting and really the relationship between the investments you're making here and what's being adopted at the regional level as programs and plans that voters are expecting.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, move on to item number 15. You want to add anything else, Mitchell?
No, I would recommend adoption of the guidelines with the 2 changes I noted earlier. Page 40, section 18, delete the second bullet, and in terms of the project-specific reporting, to add or greater than or equal to $15 million in STIP costs.
Any discussion 68 from the commission? Commissioner Inman?
Were you going back to the $50 million total?
To $50 million total,
okay,
or greater than equal to $15 million.
Okay, so
STIP.
replace the $20 million.
Yep. In place of the $20 million.
Any other discussion or questions? You have a motion?
I'll move it.
I have a motion.
I have a question. I'm afraid to use my microphone now. From a process standpoint, considering that it seems like there are still a few things that others would like to see worked out, if we were to defer this for one more month to try to do that, does it screw up the process, or it does? Okay, thank you.
I have a motion.
I'll second the motion, Mr. Chair.
A motion by Commissioner Burke, seconded by Commissioner Gardino. All those in favor? We want a roll call? Or?
Yes. Roll call.
Roll call.
Commissioner Burke? Commissioner Dunn?
Pass for the moment.
Commissioner Orsini?
Pass.
Commissioner Art?
Aye.
Commissioner Gardino?
Aye.
Commissioner Inman? Aye. Commissioner Tavaloni?
Aye.
Chair Gumedi?
Aye.
Commissioner Orsini?
Aye.
Commissioner Dunn?
Aye.
The motion passes. That was laborious.
It's a reluctance, because it's just, it needs more work.
Okay, moving on to item number 16. Fund estimate, Mitchell and Stephen? You're tired?
Good morning again, Chair and Commissioners. Very pleased to be here for the last time during the 2014 STIP cycle to present on the final 2014 fund estimate. I've been giving a presentation at every meeting since the beginning of this calendar year. Staff at Caltrans and at CTC have been working on this thing for an entire year now. And so I'm very pleased to present the final results of the fund estimate. So we did have a workshop on the fund estimate on July 18th. The numbers in the final fund estimate in terms of capacity are not different from that was presented at that time. In terms of total capacity, the shop target capacity over the 5-year period is about $11.4 billion. The STIP capacity over that same time frame is about $3.4 billion. And the STIP in the 2014 fund estimate is about $260 million more over that 5-year period than in the 2012 fund estimate. So we're seeing slightly higher overall funding for the STIP. I'll note, for those of you who couldn't make it to the July workshop, that this final fund estimate includes STIP capacity that is $271 million more than the initial draft fund estimate that was presented in June, which I have not heard any complaints about from anyone. It also, as we noted before, represents the elimination of the Transportation Enhancement Program, which was a loss of about $400 million in revenue over the period. So the fact that this fund estimate is still as good as it is representative of a slightly brighter outlook than we've seen in the past. I like to be able to say that because it hasn't been something I've said since 2007. So really the fund estimate is pretty darn good. The capacity is looking very good, and I haven't heard, as I said, any complaints about it at all. I don't know if it's my role or Mitch's role to ask for adoption at this point, but since we've gone over this over and over again, I'd really like to get it adopted. And what the department will do is to create the fund estimate book, which is a beautiful document including all the assumptions and all the text around the fund estimate within the next 30 days. We will publish that both in print and on our website. And then we're done with the fund estimate for this cycle, and we will begin again in a month or two.
Thank you, Stephen.
Move adoption, Mr. Chair.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Arp, seconded by Commissioner Dunn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you very
Stephen.
much.
Okay, moving on to item number 17. Nazar?
Good morning, Chairman Gumedi and Commissioners. My name is Nizar Malahani. I'm the acting P3 Program Manager in the department. We are before you today to present a brief overview of the Accelerated Regional Transportation Improvement, ARTI project.
Could you get a little closer to your microphone, please? Thank you.
As a proposed public-private partnership project as an information item. The department is proposing to co-sponsor the RDP3 project with Los Angeles Metropolitan Transportation Authority, LAMTA, and Mr. Roger Moyer, Chief Real Property and Economic Development from Metro, will join to make the presentation. Caltrans and LA Metro began work developing this package as a package of project as a P3 project last year after LAMTA board approval. An industry outreach was held in July 2012 with over 250 attendees to gauge market reaction to the project. Subsequently, both sponsors entered into a cooperative agreement and developed a project as necessary, and a formal request for qualification was issued last May 2013. The draft business case value for money analysis was reviewed last month by the sponsor staff. A final copy of this business case will be part of the project proposal report to be presented to the CTC for the required approval. Sponsors hope to present this project to the CTC for approval at your October 2013 meeting pursuant to Section 143 of the Streets and Highway Code. With that, I introduce Mr. Roger Moyer, Chief Real Property Economic Development at LAMTA.
Good morning, Commissioner, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm pleased to be able to present an overview of what we hope to be our first P3 project at Metro. This project is called Accelerated Regional Transportation Improvements, and I think the real emphasis for us is on acceleration. This is a project, or a group of projects really, that would be many decades away were it not for the ability to use the P3 methodology. We're excited about it and hopefully meets all your criteria. It is largely locally funded, about 70%. The state's responsibility is really limited to maintenance and the ongoing maintenance costs and capital costs for the I-5 paving. So we think there's a limitation on state liability and a good allocation of responsibility among the public and private sector. The project itself is actually a bundle of 6 separate projects. They are largely, as you can see, additional HOV and HOT lanes, mixed flow lanes and truck lanes along the I-5, the SR and the SR-71, along with 2 sound wall packages. The project features are, in chief are that by bundling the projects, we were able to program different years of funding over a 35-year stream of payment, and the sound walls in SR-71, which did have some early funding, were the key to enable a constant flow of funding. The tolling then on the hot lanes on the proposed I-5 closes that funding gap and enables us to really do the project many decades earlier, as noted. We looked at, of course, all of the potential methods, including DB and DBB, to identify the best mechanism to accelerate delivery and achieve the most cost effectiveness and allocate the risk appropriately. The benefits, I think, are very great. We will hopefully complete by 2019, which is really 2 decades earlier than would normally be the case, creating something like 9,000 jobs. The risk of cost and schedule risk go to the developer. The operation and maintenance cost is borne by the developer over a 35-year period, yet providing the sponsors with oversight and safety enforcement, and we believe really increasing the connectivity and capacity of the roads around the area. We looked, as indicated, at the business cases. We are close to finalizing those, and we will hope to forward those to your staff within the matter of just a couple of weeks. The project structure, again, very straightforward. We are in the midst of finalizing funding agreements with Caltrans for the milestone and availability payments. Caltrans will be the contracting authority with the developer, and the payments flow that way in this simplified diagram. Although it is a bundle of projects, the construction itself is really very straightforward. It's although a number of projects, it's a straightforward traditional construction type of project, which has the type of risk allocation you would see in any normal P3 project, but particularly effective in this instance. Nizar mentioned our schedule. We have, in fact, issued the RFQ, hopefully shortlisting by August 30, and then hope to be in front of you in October with the detailed proposal for your approval. With that, if there are any questions, I'd be more than pleased to try to answer them. And we're looking forward to seeing you in more detail to present this program in October.
Questions? Commissioner Burke?
I don't have a question exactly. But I have to say, Mr. Moliere was working on public-private partnerships and working on 375 before there was a 375. And so I really know his expertise in this area and the creativity he has. And I certainly would have a lot of confidence if he's pushing a project and working on it as a consultant.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Inman?
So the hot lane is on I-5 North. Is a truck lane proposed as a toll lane as well?
No, that will not be a toll lane.
Okay.
Other questions? We'll have a couple. Is this a Metro project or a Caltrans project? Or
certainly a joint project. We're very pleased to join with Caltrans, who is really the sponsor, the chief sponsor. They'll be the contracting party. We're entering into a funding agreement and cooperative agreements with Caltrans. Caltrans is not the major funding partner, of course, in this one. This is really, as I indicated earlier, about 72% actually locally funded through Prop C and Measure R, our local tax measure that was passed several years ago.
So this is going to be availability payments from...
There are availability payments and there are tolls which supplement, but the tolls are backed by Metro, as are the capital costs. So the risk of any overruns or underruns on either tolling or capital costs are Metro's. So the funding from the state, from Caltrans, is limited really to their traditional maintenance function.
So the availability funds will come out of your local sales tax?
That's correct.
Is that right? Mm-hmm. And then I'm looking at the map of all these bundles of projects, et cetera. So if this contractor builds a sound wall, a small stretch of sound wall, next to a sound wall that the state already owns, he just maintains that sound wall? How does this thing work on a maintenance level?
The only operation maintenance the developer will undertake is at two locations. It's on I-5, where the tolling is going to take place, and Route 71. The rest of these elements, part of the 6 elements, these will be constructed, it will be designed, constructed, and revert back to the state after 5 years of warranty on those facilities. But they would not be part of the O&M for the developer's part. So the O&M only on 2 parts, I-5 and 71.
Okay. Any other questions? Secretary Kelly.
Hi. You mentioned 72% of the funding for this would come out of Prop C and Measure R. Yes. Is that right? Can you, just for the totality, I'm guessing this is financed in a way where all 6 of the projects on page 3 are financed in a single financing. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can you, I don't see in here, and so I'm curious about the overall cost and then the breakdown in terms of who's contributing what to that cost.
Gotcha. Yeah, we have that detail. I didn't want to get into that level of detail, but we'll certainly give it to staff. But Doug, you want to talk about that individually?
Even if you can just describe the shares.
Certainly. The sound walls that are proposed are primarily going to be funded with our Proposition C funds, local measure funds, so that takes care of those 2 elements. The funds for Route 71 are a combination of Prop C. There's some other advanced federal construction that we're looking at, working through local shares of federal funds that are a part of that. And I'm looking at Patricia. That's the primary part of that was Prop C and the federal funds. We have Measure R, primarily for the hot lanes on Interstate 5. We're proposing that be supplemented with the toll revenues to complete those hot lanes for that 14-mile segment. The Caltrans had a proposed pavement rehabilitation within that same limits on I-5. That pavement rehab will come from the state as a milestone payment. upon completion of that work, and that allows us to actually go through an extended warranty. So we're going to have the contractor warranty not just the hot lane on I-5, but perform that activity at an enhanced level through all of I-5 for that 14-mile segment. From the 514 interchange up to Parker Road is the proposal. The enhancements to the maintenance are going to be paid for out of the toll.
And so with the overall project, 72% Prop C Measure R, is the remaining 28% state, or are there other sources going into that?
Toll is a part of that
Toll.
as well.
Do you have that breakdown of the 28%? Is it?
I don't have it with us, but we will certainly make sure staff gets that to you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Arp?
As you put this together, I'm curious what the logic was to have a toll lane on I-5 for vehicles, but the lane that you're constructing for trucks is not tolled.
The truck lane is not a part of this specific package. We're actually constructing a toll lane separately today, Metro funded primarily through Measure R funds, and that is under construction today from the 514 interchange to Pico Lyons. The grades within that stretch do not allow for it to be a separate facility as would be necessary in order to create a toll on it. It's immediately adjacent to the existing lanes. It's really a climbing lane as you go up and down the hills. From the southbound direction from Pico Lyons, you climb the hill to get over where Gavin Canyon is, and you come down at the 514 interchange and then the opposite. We are under discussions of developing a truck lane then the rest of the way out, perhaps to the Kern County line. That's in our long-range plan, long ways out. No funds identified for how to move that yet. So we can have that conversation at that time, depending on if we're able to create a separated facility such that tolling could be effective.
Any further questions? Secretary Kelly?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, just one more. The identified revenues that we've gone over, tolls, state funds, and the local measure dollars, you're describing this as a P3. I'm just curious, can you sort of describe the private role?
Sure. There's a 10% equity, and of course, much of the money is being sculpted over the years, so there will be some debt early, and then that will even out with availability payments. So it really is a kind of a combination.
And the availability payments, I think somebody said earlier, were coming from the local measure money?
From Metro, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, and tolls. That
and
reminds
tolls.
me, part of that is toll money,
Okay.
yes. But that's, of course, backed by Metro as well.
And then somebody referenced a draft business plan. That's still in draft form?
It is all but completed, so we hope to have it to the staff, CTC staff, within a matter of weeks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Inman?
I just have a question on how we got to this particular list. It seems like a little bit of a smorgasbord there.
Yes, that one would be my fault if necessary. What we were looking for was the ability to create a stable cash flow over a 35-year period so that we could create a structure that made sense to both deal with from a debt and equity standpoint. We were hoping to find a single project within our long-range plan where we could find that made sense, and just the way we program funds, there was no one single project available that made sense to do that. But by putting together this combination of projects, we recognized, the construction types, even though they're in different locations, are relatively similar. They're very common with the type of construction within the LA Basin, so there's just a wealth of contractors that are available to do this and have, in fact, expressed interest in participating. So it really became a combination of a look at the type of work, making sure it was relatively similar so a single entity could oversee it, and then looking at how the cash flow was arranged in our long-range plan so we could create a stable stream of funding over a 35-year period and able to address both debt and equity needs.
Was the use of Garvey bonds ever considered as an alternative source of funding?
We are looking at TIF. We have not looked at Garvey funds. There's very little federal funds anticipated in this project. Most of the SHOP funds that the state's using on I-5 is federal funds. That's anticipated to be a milestone payment up early, reduces both debt and equity. The other piece of federal funding that's identified is a small piece associated with Route 71 that is out in the future, fund type to be identified yet. We're actually thinking that TIFIA will be a loan that will help us reduce both debt and equity on this.
Okay, any further questions? Commissioner Arp?
So just in terms of risk, what's the primary risk that the private entity would be, just in simple terms, what's the primary risk that they would be incurring?
Sure, cost and schedule, the two big ones. They'll have that risk of bringing it in at the budgeted amount, any overruns, and of course schedule on-time delivery of the project. So those are two large ones.
So if the tolling that you're anticipating doesn't bear out, that's going to be backed up by Measure R funds?
That is ours, yes.
And that was something that was part of Measure R? I mean, to the vote?
All the projects are Measure R, and then our board has approved the project as described here, which would include us being responsible for capital cost and the funding shortfall. Actually, we believe there'll be extra money from the tolls, fairly significant, which we hope will pay for enhancements to the maintenance on I-5.
I would note that also our Prop C funds, which are unallocated, unlike Measure R, are also available as a backstop.
Okay.
Commissioner, just a quick comment. That is something that we will nail down in the funding agreement fairly quickly, so that we have clear understanding moving forward what the state's liability would be.
Okay, any other further questions? Thank you very much. This was an informational item. Moving on to item 18. Secretary Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just an update on the work we're doing in the California Transportation Infrastructure Priorities Program. This is a large work group that we've broken into 4 subgroups to review, as I commented earlier. First, I think the condition of our existing transportation system, get a sense about where we want to take it, and then develop what kind of funding is necessary to take it there. We've had 2 meetings of the whole committee and 4 separate subcommittee meetings in the prior months. I expect the work is going to intensify going forward. One of the things that we're trying to accomplish in the conversations is to first get a sense of some of the performance measures or reforms that we want to see in the transportation system or necessary things that we need to address that are non-fiscal, and then know that, and of course it's sort of an operating assumption that we have to get to the funding question. But somebody mentioned earlier, I'll just take a minute to comment on this. I think it was Mitch in an earlier testimony described the state of Massachusetts' recent increase in their gas tax, and I was recently talking to the secretary of their DOT about that process and how they did it and what they achieved. And he said to me there's really 4 key pieces to getting to a funding solution for them. One is be very clear with the public on what the crisis is. Second one is initiate necessary reforms to your existing system. Include stakeholders in the development of your process and your plan. Communicate well with the public. And then fourth and importantly, describe how any funds you raise will be used, and specifically what taxpayers will receive from the package. A couple of those are prerequisites, describing the crisis and getting through some necessary reforms to the system. I think we're spending time on that work now. Some of that includes reform work we're doing at the Department of Transportation with the external review process I mentioned. And then other reforms have to do with, as we lay out our priorities, and I suggested them earlier, preserving the system, integrating high-speed rail, updating and revising our freight strategy, partnering with locals and regions to execute 375 plans. That those are our 4 sort of pillars. The question is, what are the things in the current law or our current system that make those hard to achieve? And that is part of where our conversation is now. Our last meeting, which was on July 25th, was about a 3.5-hour meeting with the group, working through some of these things. It's a little bit tough to have the reform conversation if they're not seeing the big picture on the vision. So I'm taking up the charge to come back at them with a more concrete expression of kind of where we want to go, how we would identify the challenges that we need to work through, and then bring that to the group and move forward with the conversation. Our objective here is to have a set of preliminary recommendations to the governor later in the fall. So the work continues. I would hope at your October hearing I can come in with a greater set of specifics about where we are and where we think we're going. But again, we're rolling up the sleeves and working through the process.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Any questions? Okay, moving on to item number 19, Bay Bridge, a brief Bay Bridge update by Stephen Mahler.
In July, the Public Program Oversight Committee issued a report.
Yeah, that's it.
In early July, the Tollbridge Program Oversight Committee issued a report on all the vaults, or rods as their real name is, and you should have that in your packet. I need it. And something's not clicking right. Okay. On this chart, what's really important for you guys to note is the number of, well, this thing is not going to work, is the number of bolts that are involved, 2,306, and also the very left-hand column where we give the tension levels underneath which these bolts are. They vary from 0.1, which is basically snug tight, to 0.7, which is 70% of the ultimate strength of the material. On the next slide, slide 4, shows you the locations of these rod bolts, and you will see the majority of the action is at Pier E2. We have some at the top of the tower, some at the bottom of the tower, and what's should be noted here is the green circles. These are areas where the bolts are will be in dehumidification chambers, so they will not have much humidity there. Next slide, please. Okay. On slide 5, what we have is two phenomena here: is hydrogen embrittlement, which is a short-term phenomena, and stress corrosion cracking, which is a long-term phenomena. I would think of these as two twins. They're born, they have the same DNA. One twin becomes evil almost immediately. And the second twin is a perfect baby, is a perfect child, is a perfect teenager, is a perfect adult, and then becomes into old age and becomes crotchety, old, and mean. And we hopefully that it doesn't happen, but it could happen, and that's what we're kind of worried about. You actually need, for this phenomenon to happen, you need three things to happen at once. You need to have presence of hydrogen, you need high stress levels, and you need susceptible material. If we go to slide 6, this is on the 2008 rods, and this is we've been having these cupcake analogies, and I'll use one here too. What's happening here is we were baking these anchor rods, and we overcooked the edges. We had very high hardness of 38, and we undercooked the middle of it. It's very mushy and gooey and not fully cooked. And this is what this chart kind of represents. You go from very hard burnt edges to very soft middle, and that's what's causing our hydrogen embrittlement problem. Next slide, number 7, shows you the locations. The S1, S2 Shirky locations are shown in red. That's where that's where the rods broke. These rods are embedded in the columns, so we can't replace them. So in order to fix these, on slide number 8, we are producing this saddle contraption that provides the same clamping force as the bolts that broke. And the purple thing in the middle is the shear key. The two things on the sides, the yellow things on the sides, are the bearings. The shear key protects the bearings. And then we will be running cables across the shear key and tightening those down, so we're basically building a bunch of suspenders because our belt broke. Slide number 9 shows you the status of how we're building the saddle. On the picture on the left, you see the preparation of the bent cap, where we are drilling holes into the bent cap for reinforcing steel to be settled in, plus we chipped out a bunch of concrete where the actual steel cables will be running. And you also on the right-hand side see the plate of the shear key, where we have already machined off pieces of it and taken the bolts off that broke. On slide 10, we have the retrofit schedule and bridge opening. The contractor forecasted that the shear key retrofit will be completed in December 2013. The Toll Bridge Program Oversight Committee will select a bridge opening date based on retrofit completion, weather windows, and traffic impacts. And bridge opening may not coincide necessarily with a Monday holiday weekend and will involve shorter advance notice to the public. On slide 11, we show you what's been happening with the other rods. Item number 1, the top one, is the rods that failed, and obviously we're replacing those with the saddle system. And as you can see, the other rods, as of August 1st, have been under tension now from at least a quarter of a year to almost 4 years, and have not exhibited any problems yet. If we move on to slide number 12, again on the left-hand side, we show you the prior slide with the 2008 rods, where we had the overcooked and undercooked cupcake. We have examined the other rods through hardness testing, and you see that their composition is much better. You don't get the deep trough that you did on the slide on the left-hand side. They're more uniform. Obviously, you can never get the center the same as the outside, but the hardness is lower, and we don't get the deep groove in there. On slide number 13, this is kind of a rod-by-rod resolution of what we're going to be, the Program Oversight Committee is considering. Under the first column, we're basically replacing the bolts with the saddle contraption. Under the second column, we have certain rods that we most likely will be replacing, but we're conducting tests on these that started this week, where we've been immersing them, full-size tests where we're taking these rods at full size, immersing them in salt solution and putting them under tension, and that will provide us with information what will happen to these things in old age. Will they become mean and nasty, or will they be good? Under the third column, there are certain rods where we can reduce the tension from high tension to lower tension. On the fourth column, there are certain rods where we can actually augment the dehumidification. And under the last column, some of these things are basically snug tight, or other areas where we just will be looking at them and see what happens, and most likely nothing will happen. So on slide 14, the bottom line of all of this is the risk of near-term hydrogen embrittlement has passed. The ones that were going to break immediately have broken. Long-term stress corrosion can be managed safely and effectively after the SAS is placed into service. For now, the Toll Bridge Program Oversight Committee has determined it is safe to open the new east span after replacing the capacity lost by the failed 2008 rods. And that's my short presentation, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any Commissioner Burke?
I just have some questions about a couple of pages. One deals with the specifications for the rods, and I read that somewhere that there was a reliance on standards, and I'd just like to get some information about that. And then I'd also like to get some information about the time to assemble the information on the SAS rods in the case of the Marine Foundation contract. I'd just like to get some, if it's too much trouble now, I can get it later.
On the specifications, what happened, there was a reliance on standard ASTM specifications, which said hardness of between 31 and 39. For these type of high-strength rods, what we found out is the specification should have been much more tighter to this particular application. Probably the strength of these, hardness of these rods should have been no more than 34, 35. And one of the lessons learned is don't rely on national standards. Be particularly selective of what you're actually doing in the field. On your second question, I'm not quite sure what you were asking.
Okay, on the findings, I can get this information later, but I was just, it said something about there were sole source specifications, but there was a question in terms of locating some of the information.
Oh, what you're probably referring to are some of the quality control tests that so far the department has not been able to locate. This was done on the contract that dealt with the construction of the tower foundation. That contract was closed out already, and so far we haven't been able to find some of the quality assurance tests, but we've gone through and tested each and every bolt in place, so we have the information for each bolt. It's just that it's a kind of an embarrassment that you can't find these things.
Right. It just says something about it's necessary for failures and also for routine maintenance. And so that's why I was asking.
Yeah. No, we have tested each and every bolt in place, so we know the hardness across each bolt.
Commissioner Inman?
Stephen, we have another big bridge project, Gerald Desmond Bridge. I realize different designs, but is there any information, any lessons learned here that we can transfer to that process?
Yes, don't use high-strength rods.
Any other questions of Stephen? Secretary Kelly?
Stephen, I just want to ask a question. I want a little clarity on page 13 of your presentation. I think this is the key finding of the July report that was issued by the Toll Bridge Project Oversight Committee, and I just want to spend a minute to put some emphasis on it. The column on the left that identifies the rods that broke, and that column and only that column suggests that those need to either be replaced or retrofitted prior to opening. And all the other rods are categorized as issues that can be addressed through a strenuous maintenance program post-opening. Is that correct?
That is correct. The ones we need to replace the clamping capacity or the capacity of the rods that broke under those two shear keys.
And then can I ask the Federal Highway Administration a question as well on this? You mentioned earlier in your presentation that there is you're conducting some reviews of work at the department, including a review of the July report and the recommendations in that report. I know you said that your full report is coming out in a couple of weeks, but has the FHWA reached any view yet on the treatment of the bolts as outlined in the report, or is that something we need to wait a little longer for?
Yes, Mr. Secretary. We are still evaluating that, and in terms of the bolts and the treatment of those, and that will be contained in the report.
Okay, thank you.
Just to...
Since I drive the bridge every day, would you hurry up?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Now, the federal government FHWA has given us a preliminary verbal statement on the treatment of these rods.
Right. That was part of the testimony at the data hearing.
What we're waiting for is a final written report, but we don't need the final written report on these rods to move forward.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you, Stephen. We'll move on to item number 20, Buy America. Stephen and Brent,
Yes, Commissioners. Brent will be presenting on this item. Just the key things to note is that the feds have given us a half-a-year reprieve. Vince told us that will never happen, but due to the Commissioner's hard work, that has happened. And most of our projects that we were not able to vote at the last two Commission meetings will be actually able to vote at this Commission meeting. With that, I'll let Brent get into the nitty-gritty.
Yes, good morning, Chair Gilmetti, Commissioners. Brent Green with Caltrans, Division of Right-of-Way and Land Surveys. Last meeting, for who was at that, Buy America seemed to dominate the meeting. There was a lot of discussion about that. That, fortunately, is not the case today, but it may be after January. So everyone's correct that has thanked the groups that have helped with the Buy America. There's been a huge outpouring from commissioners and locals and Caltrans, a lot of behind the scenes. So I'd just like to congratulate everybody because I think it was a huge success. The real backbone for the request was based on a letter from Malcolm Dockery on okay. Oh, yeah, perfect. Anyway, it's based on a letter from Malcolm Dockery on June 27th to Victor Mendez, the Highway Administrator in Washington, D.C. This is the key portion of the letter that calls out for the change. Because highway construction projects are now being delayed or threatened with delay, for non-federally funded utility relocations, FHWA is providing utility companies a reasonable period of time through December 31st to take necessary steps to ensure that their iron and steel products used in relocation work as part of federal aid highway projects comply with Buy America. I'm very, very excited about this. The very next day, Federal Highways in California issued another memo, kind of a supplemental memo, that provides a lot of additional guidance. It's kind of the nuts and bolts that the utility owners and the locals and Caltrans have been waiting for to close some of the gaps that have kind of hindered our ability to move forward. The various reports and letters you've seen over time talk about projects in construction and those that haven't gone to construction. And the question was posed, did this letter completely free up all 9 construction projects to move forward? It did in part, but not completely, and I'll briefly explain why. Not everybody has the privilege of the PowerPoint with them because it was recently delivered. This, for those who are commissioners and those in the audience, these numbers have changed since Sunday afternoon, and it's a more positive picture than this. Of the 9 projects, 3 projects worth $286 million can immediately move forward. They've got executed utility agreements. There's no longer any Buy America constraints. Instead of 2 projects on the second bullet, it's now 3 projects worth $1.9 billion can now move forward. They will be unconstrained, but at least 1 or more utility agreements has not yet been executed. So we anticipate them being executed, but it just takes time to get those executed. So as soon as those are complete, those will be in the same category as the first bullet. On the first bullet, or the third bullet rather than 1 project it's now 2 projects at $1.6 billion are partially unconstrained, meaning that some of the utility agreements are good to go because those utility owners are signing the agreements. There's still some nuts and bolts behind the line because there's a lot, utility agreements, there's a lot of language. Many times the owners have multiple agreements on 1 project, so that particular letter helps some of the agreements but not others. So it's still a work in progress, so that's why we're calling them, partially unconstrained, so that's good news, but they're not necessarily completely free for construction. And there's at least 1 project that we're not quite certain yet, and the reason why is that some of the utility agreements can be executed by the end of December, and there's others that might not be. Gerald Nesbin Bridge is in that category. Some might be executed by the end of December, a great benefit, but on a project that's a multi-project, especially design build, not all the utility agreements will be executed by the end of December, and that's why all 9 aren't completely tied up. I debated on listing the projects, but because they're so significant to the regions, I think it's worthwhile. I won't do it on all the projects, but all these projects have various degrees of benefits I described. Willis Bypass, the DeVore Interchange, the 1065 Connector, I-5 North Corridor, Marin 101, Gerald Desmond Bridge, Bi-County and District 8, 405 Design Build, and the 91 CIP. So all those projects benefited from that letter. So we're very pleased about that. I'm sure the regions are as well. There were a number of projects, both in May and June, that were listed but were not able to vote because of Buy American constraints. 5 of those 6 projects should be on your vote list today, so that's a huge success there. The one project that's not on the vote list is not a constraint due to Buy America. It's something that will be voted later in the year, but in terms of Buy America, it cleared that constraint. It's just not ready for vote today. And those projects include Alameda 880, Santa Barbara 101, the Linwood grade separation, Lakeview grade separation, and Cordelia. So for those projects, those are all very high-profile, recognizable projects. So I think that's fantastic as well. In addition to those 6, there are at least 4 or 5 additional projects since June that would have been up against the wall in August that now can move forward. Again, very exciting. Long-term view, it is very important to recognize, and I know that Rick Backlund and others have already obviously recognized this, is that come January 1, we may be in the same situation we had been for several months. So we don't know at this point. Many of the utility owners are working very aggressively toward becoming compliant, but a big question mark remains between now and then whether they'll achieve full compliance by January 1st. The second point I want to make in terms of waivers for some materials, we already know that even if they were given beyond December 31st, there are some parts that we think will not be available domestically. So we're not out of the woods on those. Our understanding is that come later in the year, or maybe even short term, we'll be applying for waivers for those specific parts. But that's kind of a work in progress. But that's another risk that I think is willing to share. The other, the third bullet, unknown impact of interpretation of legislation. There was a great degree of information and discussion on that the last commission meeting. There are a couple utility owners that are hanging their hats on that particular point, meaning that they're not ahead of the pack in terms of becoming fully compliant. So that's also a risk. I won't name who those are, but we know that there's a couple. We're continuing to work with those. But again, that's a significant risk. And during this whole process, we're monitoring what utility agreements those are. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes work by a lot of players to make this happen. So I'm very, very pleased about that. Just since the last meeting, we've noted a very, I don't know whether you scared them last meeting or what exactly you did, but there's been a huge level of commitment by the 2 utility owners that showed up the last meeting. And although they had been working very diligently prior to that at a very high level, they're continuing to do that. They haven't slowed down. They've accelerated their efforts. We've had many meetings with them. A lot of the constraints that they put forward, we're working through them. FHWA has been a huge player in making that happen. So from my perspective, they've done a fantastic job, and I give them credit. They've also helped us work through projects in construction. I was surprised to see how much closed-door activity it takes to make these happen, and that primarily has to do with the detailed utility agreements, the timing, the moving of things, a great deal, and they've been really helpful in that respect too. Next steps. We still have, as mentioned, on the projects in construction and others, there's still remaining utility agreements to execute. There was so much information going in terms of clauses and things like that for compliance. We're backing some of that out. So that's a work in progress. There's still many left to go. Second bullet, continue engagement towards working with utility owners. As I mentioned, some owners are completely on board. We're fast-tracking those as much as we can to work toward full compliance, but that's really a risk on their side. And to the extent necessary, we're partnering with FHWA. They've been working with us hand in hand through all these issues, so I commend FHWA on that as well. So with that, I'd like to conclude my presentation and answer any questions you may have.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just an observation that actually is connected to the last item, in my view. A few weeks ago, Senator DeSaulnier and myself, Brian Annis from the Transportation Department, and Janet Dawson from the legislature, Assembly Trans Committee, went to Washington to speak. We spent a whole day with their transportation people, reviewing a program that they've had in place now for about over a decade. They call it the Gray Notebook. It's basically a compilation of data kinds of data that Transportation Department puts together, but oftentimes doesn't know what to do with it. And they were experiencing back in the early 2000s many of the same difficulties that we seem to be having here in terms of a declining public confidence in our transportation system and the people who run it and so forth, even though there's a lot of good things that those departments are doing. They're run by engineers, and engineers they solve problems, they don't communicate. And if anybody wants to debate that, I'm ready to do it, because I have a son who's an engineer. So I have personal experience in communication versus problem solving. So what I'm getting at is that I looked on the Capitol Alert this morning, and the one thing they had to say about our meeting today was that they were going to be addressing the bolt problem on the Bay Bridge. That's all we're doing today, by the way, folks. So you saw that discussion. We are solving the problem. We are not solving the communications problem. We are not solving the public image problem. And that is a big problem. And we need to change that. There are some management issues, obviously, that we're going to have to deal with within Caltrans, within the transportation community as we go forward. And I think we'll address those. But communication and the lack of it at the proper time and the proper amount of transparency and just being able to cop up to things that need to happen is very important. Here today, there was a problem-solving exercise that we've been grappling with within the transportation community for the last several months. We have some good commissioners who worked hard, some other folks in Caltrans. People got together, and they moved a mountain, basically, and we've got hundreds of millions of dollars of projects that are now going to move forward. And if we as a transportation committee don't communicate that to the public, we're idiots. We've got to be able to do a better job of explaining how we are getting things done and creating jobs. This is a problem that is not totally solved, and frankly, transparency is going to be important, I think, to get those other projects on. Somebody's feet will probably have to be held to the fire at some point, and we got to be willing to do it. We have to be able to think more in terms of what we do in this little transportation community, how the people perceive it. We do a lot of polling in my day job, and right now the voters don't see a problem with transportation infrastructure funding. They think our transportation system seems to be okay. They don't want to dig in their pockets to put more money on the table. And we have to change that. We're not going to change it by sitting here talking to ourselves and not addressing problems and not communicating. So anyway, done with speech. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just so I'm clear, I'm not an engineer.
Commissioner Inman?
Well, first of all, I want to salute Brent and his team for really putting a full court press along with all of our regional partners. I want to encourage everybody to keep the full court press up. I don't want us to relax too much because I think we still have lots of work to go. And to Jim's point, to keep our progress moving forward. We can take one breath, but that's about all, and then we've got to jump back in the pool and swim some more laps. I have a couple of things. I want to salute Skag and Hassan and Sharon, my fellow commissioner. Dunn and I participated with most of our regional CEOs, our utility partners, and I think it was a great day of everybody really rolling up their sleeves and saying, what about this, what about that? Oh, I never thought of it. And I think it's important. Did we get the maintenance issue solved, Brent? I know at that workshop there was discussion about the ongoing utility parts that are going to have to be replaced, and so I want to make sure we don't lose sight of that when we get our...
Yeah, there's been some things that FHWA did clarify since then in terms of if you're reusing the same parts and the relocation to those parts need to be Buy American compliant, and the answer is no. It wouldn't make sense to invest additional taxpayer money in parts to make them Buy America when you have parts that have been in the ground you can use. So some of those details have been worked out, yes.
Okay, well, keep up the good work, and if we have to apply for a waiver, let's get those in sooner as opposed to later, because I'm told that there's a specific process, and that may take a little bit of time.
That's true.
Okay. Commissioner Dunn?
Thank you. Thank you also, Brent, for your hard work. I really appreciate it. And an amen to Brother Arp on the communication side. Sister Dunn and Brother Arp. Because I have to share with you, even just trying to explain Buy America to my 50 CEOs at my board of directors, it took a long time to explain, public policy by soundbite. And so it was really interesting to try to move them as well, to be supportive of what we're trying to do. Going forward, however, I don't mean to put you on the spot or anybody on the spot. Somebody can answer this question. You're spot on that we have a deadline of 6 months to ramp up, but we've heard very clearly from our utilities this could be a couple of years. And yet at the same time, thinking about MAP 21 reauthorization, I'm sure Caltrans are already looking at starting the process of what it would include to reauthorize MAP 21. And we know from Victor Mendez that this is an interpretation issue, not, an item in MAP 21. So I would just suggest that we start thinking about adding that to the agenda of talking with our congressional representatives, our senators, especially Senator Boxer if possible, about what does the next iteration of MAP 21 look like, and can it help us sooner than later in taking care of these issues? I don't know, just saying, I'm trying to think ahead before we have another meeting like we had last time and are looking at shutting down projects. December comes very quickly.
I should recognize that Victor Mendez at Washita yesterday did come in California for really leading the way in this and providing the data and input necessary to make that decision. So I thought that was also a kudo for us.
Secretary Kelly?
A couple of things, Mr. Chairman. First, to Commissioner Arp's point, that communication issue is one of the things that the SSTI review team is looking at Caltrans, and I concur with your point that sometimes we don't do a very good job of communicating the things we do well. And, I would observe that by the end of this meeting today, you guys will be allocating somewhere around $500 million to transportation projects throughout the state, and there's probably 15 or 17,000 jobs tied to that investment, and that in and of itself is an accomplishment, and something that I think we do need to have better focus on. With respect to the specific issue of Buy America, I just want to, Brent said it a minute ago, but I want to just reiterate for the crowd that yesterday I saw Victor Mendez in San Francisco. He pulled me aside and was highly complimentary of Malcolm Doherty, Brent, and his entire team who worked on this issue. I could tell you that I saw Brent's work schedule when he was in the midst of this, and it was meeting after meeting every day on just this issue. And I kept saying, what about these others? No, just kidding. But it was meeting after meeting on just this issue. So a ton of work went into this, and the Federal Highway Administration administrator knows it and appreciated the work California did to help them try to solve the problem on a national scale. Brent, the only question, so I want to commend you too, and Malcolm and your whole team. The only question I want to ask going forward on this, you noted that there are some issues that are outstanding as we get toward the end of the year, particularly with where the utility companies are on this. And I just want to ask, when you talk about the things they're doing, the work that needs to be done over the long term, I want to make sure that the utility companies themselves are having a direct communication with the Federal Highway Administration on this matter. And can you just comment on that? Because, I don't want their issues to be muted by ours. In other words, they've got things they've got to work through. Those problems are causing us problems, but it's almost a byproduct of the issues they have with that policy. And I just want to, can you just sort of comment on
the best comment I have there is I know that early on when OCTA and you approached Washington, D.C., both on the agency side and FHWA, I think in the initial expectation is that the utility owners would come together and present a plan for transition. That hasn't come to fruition yet. At the time, I don't think they felt like they had enough data to come up with a FIRD plan. So the plan that we solicited and received that I'm describing today is not a plan led by the utility owners. It's a plan led by us to provide a gap until January 1st. So yes, our expectation is that if they can't achieve full compliance by December 31st, that the onus is really on them to approach FHWA and Federal Highways with their own plan, whatever that may be.
So just to put a finer point on this, is it the expectation of the FHWA that an implementation plan from the utilities will be forthcoming?
I can't speak to that. I know that it was several months ago. The expectation is that would come. I don't believe that it has. I don't know whether they're still, intending to do that. That's something I could follow up with Federal Highways on.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one speaker, Alice Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. My name is Alice Ramsey. I'm an attorney at Caltrans, and I've worked for 15 years in the area of utilities and relocations and with local partners. Until Buy America, utilities was an esoteric area that no one had ever heard of nor cared about. However, with Buy America, it has come to the forefront. And I'm here today to say in my 15 years of working with utilities, I have never seen such a partnership before with the utility companies, our local districts, and our local transportation partners. We had agreements that normally can take from 6 weeks to 6 months to even a year to go through the local regional transportation partners and the utility companies. We had agreements that were getting signed in a day. They were faxed to us. We signed them. We faxed them back. They had the directors of the utility company signing them. They understand the importance of this. Everybody understands the importance of this. FHWA in Washington was on my speed dial, and they have helped a lot also, as has FHWA here locally. And as a result of this, at the end of the day, what I say is we're all here in our suits and we're talking about Buy America and the esoterics. But I always look at the jobs that go forward. And it's a guy at the end of the day that runs a jackhammer on the side of the road that now has money to put food on his table. It's a single mom who can send her kid to college. This has saved thousands of jobs. And I'm so proud of California. And what we have done is multiple agencies coming together in partnership. Also, I would like to say, if you want to see some of the comments that California has started, because we've gotten this whole bandwagon rolling now, at the FHWA website, PG&E put in their request for waiver. So if you Google FHWA PG&E request for waiver Buy America, you'll get it. I don't have the website here. But you have the various states now weighing in at how Buy America has affected them. You have AASHTO weighing in. You have Garamendi. You have all the different legislatures weighing in on how this affects everybody nationally and how California has been leading the way. So I do hope that when it comes time to reenact MAP 21 that the comments are taken into account, because we have been at the forefront of bringing awareness of the difficulties of complying with Buy America. So mainly I'm here today just to thank everybody for working on this. It's an amazing job, and the commissioners I thank for putting pressure on Washington too. So they were much more responsive to my phone calls after you'd been there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on quickly to the information calendar and consent calendar, and you're going to hold up a break. So,
all right, commissioners, the next 6 agenda items 21 through 26 are information reports deemed by staff not to raise any issues. We will not present them unless a commissioner requests. Hearing no requests, we'll move on to the consent calendar. The next 20 agenda items, 27 through 24 through 46, are consent items. Just to note on item 36 and 37, the project numbers are reversed. Project number 5 is actually project number 6, and project number 12 is actually project number 5. With that, staff recommends that you approve the consent calendar.
Second. I have a motion and a second by Commissioner Tavaloni, second by Commissioner Arp. All those in favor? Motion passes. We're going to take a 10-minute break. I would hope that everyone's back here by 11:32.